Today on Current Events from a Christian Perspective, we look at the disgrace brought on America by the U.S. women's soccer team. More on that. Also, we check in with Miss Universe. No, not the one that is a man that we talked about last time. This time we're talking about a country that says they will only let women win the pageant. Go figure. Then we check in with John Kirby, one of the White House correspondent communicators, who says there is a, quote, sacred right women have to have an abortion in the military. Yeah, I'm sure nothing can possibly go wrong there. A couple thousand young men trapped on a boat with some young women for months at a time, and only abortion keeps them from making a family. What a weird world we live in. All this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. Of course, I am Matt Odegaard, your host as always, and I really appreciate you stopping by. If you haven't already, hit the like, subscribe, share, hit all the buttons, all the notifications. They may or may not mean anything, but I appreciate you hitting them anyway. If you are listening on audio and you want to see some of the videos that we're going to watch today, you can go to churchpublic.com. You can go to YouTube. I'll probably be up there. Sometimes I upload on Rumble when YouTube doesn't like me, which happens from time to time, but we'll see how everything goes. At any rate, really appreciate you listening, watching, sharing, subscribing, doing all the things. All right, let's get to some news, because what I want to do is help you understand how to live in this world, but not be like this world, just as Jesus tells us to be in the world, but not of it. And you live out your faith in everything that you do. So I want to help you with that in any way that I can. Here to be a resource. As always, you don't really have to listen to anything that I have to say. You can always just read your Bible. I hope that you do. I hope that you have a reading plan, and I hope that you stick with that reading plan and do all that you can to seek after God with your heart and soul and mind and strength, basically with everything that you have. And if you tune in here, I'm going to help you try to figure out what in the world is going on in this crazy world as we look at current events from a Christian perspective. So I'll always try to bring it back to Christian worldview, but I think it's helpful to understand some of the things that are going on in the world because you live in it. Then at some point, you're going to have to walk out your front door and go into the world. And when, not if, but when you run into some of these issues, whether it is at home or at work or at school or at the grocery store, I hope through this time together that we spend, you may be more prepared to interact with this crazy world and the things that it's going to throw at you. Okay, so first thing we're going to look at today is the U.S. women's soccer team. Now, I will freely admit I am not the biggest fan of the U.S. women's soccer team, and I only mean to say by that, I don't think I've ever watched a U.S. women's soccer team game. I have nothing particularly against them in concept. Doesn't really matter to me one way or another. If you're a soccer player, fantastic. If you're a women's soccer player, fantastic. Don't really care that much. And to be really fair to you, soccer players or any sportsy people, I'm just not that into sports. It's just not my jam. I do a lot of musical things, do a lot of theology things, philosophy and Bible reading, other stuff. That's just where I spend my time and not so much on sports. But I did see this video making the rounds and thought, you know, we should talk about this. And I haven't heard a lot of people say what I'm going to say about it, so I think we should talk about it in this context. So I saw the U.S. women's soccer team. I don't even know who they were playing. To me, it doesn't really matter that much. You could research it and look it up if you really want to know. Again, it doesn't really make that much difference to the point that I'm going to make here. However, this is the beginning of the game, and if you've been to basically any sports game, you know that at the beginning of the game, they play the national anthem, especially of the place that you're in, the country that you're in. In this case, it's the U.S. women's soccer team, and they're playing the the American national anthem, right? The national anthem of the United States of America. So the Star Spangled Banner. And maybe you grew up on a rock, maybe you're not from America. You should know, if you didn't do either of those things, that you can put your hand over your heart, take your hat or your lid off, and you can sing along. You can stand there in silence. You basically honor the flag, the Star Spangled Banner, when they sing the national anthem. Because why? Because it shows honor for the country that you're in. So let's watch this and see how our U.S. women's soccer team does at the national anthem. All right, so if you're just listening, I'll describe some of the things. You're just seeing them. Anthem starts playing. Girl number 2 sort of puts her hand on her heart. Little unsure about that. So 1, 3, 4, 5 has her hand on her heart. She looks pretty good. 6, 7, no hands behind their back. And then 8, yes. 9 is no. 10, 11. So anyway, half the team is not into this. They're just standing there, stone-faced. And it seems like, okay, we got a coach. He looks really into it. You know, he's got some heartfelt emotion there. Oh, man. Yeah. You got Mr. America. All right, so that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Now, again, if I don't know if I was drowned out by the Star Spangled Banner. I was enjoying it while I was playing too. But I'm gonna let's run it back just a smidge. I won't even play through it. We'll just kind of skip through a little bit. So basically, you see the first few people, no hand on their heart. They don't seem to care. There's a couple in there that do. Then it seems like the camera person who I guess they were told, and having had a little bit of background in video and camera work, I know that the video director would have said like, okay, start with the soccer player on the end, and then we'll just pan slowly across and we'll see how patriotic and amazing they look. And then they realize, I don't know, some part of the way through, I'm like, I can hear the camera person, like the camera director in my head, and the director of videography here, like yelling at the camera person, like, okay, focus on the person who's actually into this. Find a person in the crowd, you know, find the coach that's into it, because they realize very quickly in this situation, you can't show people who basically hate America and are not interested in this at all. Okay, so here's where I want to go with this, people. That's the United States women's soccer team. And I feel like the reason I think this is an interesting one to talk about is I feel like this is something that we run into a lot in current culture, that we forget what things are for. And we're going to look at this too in men and women and some other things a little bit later today. But we forget what things are for. Here's my question for you for the day. What is the United States women's soccer team for? What is their purpose? Like, really, what is the purpose of the U.S. soccer team, the U.S. women's soccer team? Either men's or the women's. This just happens to be the women's. Is it to give some women, some girls a place to play soccer? Is it to showcase talent? I'm going to actually say no. I don't think so. Is there a reason they are named in place on the United States women's soccer team? Yes. Might that reason be they're called, by point of station, the reason they're on the United States women's soccer team, the United States team, is that they're called to travel around the world, showcasing their talents to highlight the best the United States has to offer. Yeah, right. Because they represent the United States by playing soccer. And you might say, well, soccer's silly. It's just a sport. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Again, I'm not much of a sports person, but I would differ on that. And I would say, yeah, it does matter. And the reason it matters is these people have been selected by the United States to represent the United States wherever this team goes to play other teams from other countries that also represent those countries. So we should be sending the people who represent the country of the United States best, right? So let's just ask this question from a job perspective. If you hired people to represent America in their job, to represent the United States, they are tasked to do something. Sure, it's playing a sport, but they're tasked to go out there and represent America. Then they intentionally disrespect America. What would you do? I can tell you what I would do. I would immediately fire them. I don't care who they are. Don't care how famous they are. I actually don't know who any of these people are. It doesn't really matter that much to me. But I would fire them. Why? Why not? Why wouldn't you fire them? Their entire job is to play a sport honoring America. If they no longer wish to honor America, as is in the name of their team, the United States women's soccer team, then they can find something else to do. Maybe it's time to disband the whole team until such a time as a group of women who actually like America can be found to represent the country. I know this will probably be controversial to some, but I don't know how I can see it more clearly. If you don't like America, why in the world would you be on the United States women's soccer team? This literally makes no sense to me. You're playing for the country that you apparently don't like. Go do something that you do like. Why would you waste your own time? But apparently this is the world that we live in, where we represent people, we select people to represent us who don't even like us. What a weird world we're in. Anyway, Let's move on to Italy. Speaking of being all around the world, let's go to Italy. So this is cool news. I think Miss Italy will only allow women to compete. This is really good. In a move that really should not be needed at all. But after this whole Miss Netherlands man thing, if you don't recall, this is the new Miss Netherlands, who is a man. Yeah. So anyway, Italy, the country, has said, quote, only women from birth are eligible from being crowned the winner of Miss Italy. I mean, this seems pretty reasonable to me. The official patron, Patrizia Mirigliani, my Italian froze up for a second there. Patrizia Mirigliani said, quote, lately, beauty contestants have been trying to make the news by also using strategies that I think are a bit absurd. Continuing with the quote, Miss Italia, on the other hand, will not jump on the glittery bandwagon of trans activism, end quote. I think, man, that's a pretty good quote right there. And again, something that should not be needed, because we should know that those that are in a women's beauty competition should be women. But apparently in this new world, we don't. And actually, I didn't even get a chance to research the story very much, but right before I started recording, I noticed that based on what Italy has said that they will do, that they will only allow women to win Miss Italy, I think something like 100 trans men, women, I can't keep up with the names and which thing it is, but men who are pretending to be women, like 100 of them entered the contest to try to do this. Which is like, why? They already said you don't get to win, but anyway. All right, let's continue on. Let's go back to America for a story that was kind of making the rounds. I heard it and was processing through it and just thought, hey, we should talk about this because, as you know, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, I am very passionate about babies. And I'm passionate about babies in the sense that they should have a chance to live. I don't think they should be killed in the womb just because someone decides they don't want them anymore, or they're too selfish to have them, or they want to live their life or live their truth, and the baby doesn't matter and a baby doesn't exist. I think that is a lie from the devil in the pit of hell, and babies are babies from the point of conception. So we should cherish them and talk about protecting them in whatever way we can. John Kirby, one of the White House correspondents, communication directors, kind of in between the military and the people, as he expresses some thoughts. He argued for, his words, the sacred obligation of military women to get abortions so that they can serve. Let's hear what he had to say.
Our policies, whether they're diversity, inclusion, and equity, or whether they're about transgender individuals who qualify physically and mentally to serve, to be able to do it with dignity, or whether it's about female service members, 1 in 5, or female family members being able to count on the kinds of health care and reproductive care specifically that they need to serve. That is a foundational, sacred obligation of military leaders across the river.
So let's talk about that for a second. What is sacred? Something that is sacred is literally holy. That is religious. I don't know how else you would think about that. If something is sacred, it is religious, which continues to lead credence to my idea that this is being treated like a religious movement. This whole abortion phenomena that is in America and beyond, it just is acting like a religion. And he calls it sacred. It's sacred. It's a sacred right. Religious things are sacred. I would say healthcare is not necessarily sacred. Why would healthcare be sacred? Healthcare is just healthcare. It's just biology. It's just being a doctor. But I guess healthcare is sacred when it is literally human sacrifice. Seems more in line with the Satanic Temple than American military service, but hey, what do I know? He said, quote, when you sign up and you make that contract, you have every right to expect that the organization, in this case, the military, this is continuing with the quote, is going to take care of you and they're going to take care of your families, end quote. I would add in, wait, which families are we taking care of? Like the people that say these things, I feel like they don't listen. They don't listen to themselves. If you're going to take care of your families, it would seem like killing your baby is not taking care of your families. Just the blindness of this whole thing, I just cannot comprehend it. It's crazy. Kirby also argued that not allowing troops and their family members access to abortion would hurt recruiting and retention. I'm thinking this guy might have more to do with hurting recruiting. And again, if you're just listening, this is an article that I talked about a while ago. I'm not going to replay the video and talk about it too much, but the U.S. Navy recently hired an active duty drag queen to be the face of recruitment drive. That is the headline here. That's all. And if you can't see, it's a drag queen. So, listen, America. I know you're not going to hear this, and I know you don't care, but I'm just going to tell you. I'm telling you this advice. You can take it, you can leave it. But I'm right. It is not hard to recruit soldiers. This is not rocket surgery. To recruit soldiers in America or anywhere on Earth for all of time. This is one of those things. It's just true. If you tell teenage men they get to shoot guns and go after bad guys for freedom, for their country, for their family, and their friends, they will sign up. And that's it. Period. That's all. That's the whole sales pitch. And the crazy thing is, it totally works. And it totally works because boys like guns and they have energy and they have this innate desire to conquer and have competition. That's just who they are. That's what boys do. And the more that we pretend that men are like women or women are like men or everybody's the same and there's no difference between men and women, the more we're going to struggle with things like this. When you say, oh, we're having the most recruitment problems in the military than we've ever had. It's not surprising because our recruitment model is terrible because we don't realize our audience. And we're trying to do, as Kirby just said, diversity, equity, inclusion, trans recruitment for women who need abortions so that they can get pregnant and kill their babies while they're in the military. That's your recruitment strategy? Like, what? It's just mind-blowing to me, all of these things. Like, why don't you just tell the young men, of which there are millions of in America, hey, we want you to harness your youthful energy, your youthful, even like masculine power, and use it for something good rather than something not good. And that good is channeled into a military where you get to fight for the freedom of your country and your family and your friends and everybody. Again, so many would say, sign me up. But we don't do that anymore. And so those boys and their fathers and their grandfathers who probably served and probably had generational military service are going to say, no, I'm not going to send my young men into this military service that doesn't even know who it is or what it's fighting for. Of course not. Why would they? Meanwhile, let's move on to who the next leader of the Navy is, because I think this is related, and we'll talk about it, and you'll probably be upset by this, but we got to talk about this. I was reading, and Biden has picked the next leader of the Navy, and the next leader of the Navy is, you probably guessed it, a woman. Yeah, the leader of the supreme power of the high seas is now going to be a woman. And you say, well, what's the problem with that? Let's read the article and then we'll talk about it. So this is according to the Associated Press. Quote, President Biden has chosen Admiral Lisa Franchetti to lead the Navy, an unprecedented choice that, if she is confirmed, will make her the first woman to be Pentagon Service Chief and the first female member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. End quote. Let's continue on in this AP article. Biden's decision goes against the recommendation of his Pentagon chief. Interesting. So one of his chiefs of staff said, hey, here I have a recommendation. Biden said, nah, I'm going to choose this other person. Let's hear what this Pentagon chief said. Quote, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin recommended that Biden select Admiral Samuel Paparo, the current commander of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet. Several U.S. officials said last month. The senior administration official said Biden chose Franchetti based on the broad scope of her experience at sea and ashore, including a number of high-level policy and administrative jobs that give her deep knowledge in budgeting and running the department. Because, end quote, sorry, this is my editorial now. because that's what you want in a fighting fleet. Good budgeting. Sure, maybe we can get better at budgeting, but this is the Navy, and at its base, it's not an accounting equation. Maybe this is just me thinking aloud. Perhaps the Navy, and in fact, all of the armed forces. And by the way, I have great respect for the armed forces. We'll talk about that in a second. But all of these armed forces have the express purpose of training to kill bad guys. That's literally the point of the armed forces. I know what the Army used to be all you can be. That's not what it is anymore. Now it's find who you are, or diversity is strength, or whatever it is. But the express purpose of the military is to kill bad guys. It just is. I know we don't like to think about that. We don't like to think about killing people. We don't like to think about, life and death situations. But at the end of the day, the buck has to stop somewhere. Eventually, we get to a place in battle where either you kill someone or they kill you. That's the nature of battle. Again, I know we don't like to think about this. We don't like to think about death because death is scary and we don't understand what death is. And this whole culture is trying to alleviate the very idea of death, that you just won't ever die. But the reality is you are going to die. That's why God and the scripture is so hopeful, because we know that this life is not the end and that we are living for something greater. And we're investing in this world for something greater, which means that we also need to protect our world. And we need to protect our world sometimes in a way from the bad people that want to destroy our world. And sometimes they do. Eventually, you get to a place in battle where you either kill someone or they kill you. The left would like you to think that you can just talk your way out of every situation, but that's the problem. And this problem begins at home with our local police. It goes through our border to our military serving here and abroad. At the end of the day, they are the tip of the spear. And again, I have incredible respect for those that are serving in the military that are acting as the tip of the spear. They're wonderful men and women who are serving. They are the ones who protect us, and often that is through force, or at least the threat of this force. Because here's the dirty little not so secret. The bad guys don't fight fair. They don't care. They just don't. They'll do whatever they can to win. And I think a lot of the left maybe woke up when Putin came and declared war on Ukraine and fought in these ways. And I still don't think they understand. Some people just want to battle and they'll just do it. Some people are just evil. And some people will just fight dirty and they'll just do that. And in stories, in books, in movies, we know that we see bad guys, but more and more, we don't have bad guys anymore. This is part of the weird, like we talked about Snow White the other day. Even in Snow White, it used to have a bad guy, which happened to be a bad girl, the evil stepmother. But the whole idea of Snow White in this new remake that isn't Snow White anymore, they've removed the good guy because the prince isn't there anymore and he's just an equal opportunity partner, or might not even be the story. I don't know. And the girl, Snow White, is going to be the hero of the whole story, which doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the point here is, there are bad guys in the world. Fairy tales, stories, movies, books, they remind us of this. But for some reason in real life, we think, well, there's not really any bad guys in the world. We'll just talk through all the situations. Sometimes the bad guys don't talk. They bring weapons. They want to kill. That's just what they do. I saw this terrifying clip the other day of this lady, and she was talking about her and her husband living in a house. And she said, I don't want my husband to have a gun because when the bad guys come in, we'll just talk to them and tell them to go away. And there was this weird conversation of, well, but they're going to come in and try to kill him and you and maybe worse. And she's like, well, no, they won't do that. And like, she really did not believe that bad guys would do bad things, but bad guys do bad things. And bad guys do bad things here at home and locally and abroad. And they just do this. And the military should reflect this idea, this reality, that we have to go out and protect people. We just do. And whether that's our own country or helping some of our allies, we just have to do that. And that leads us again to this biblical worldview question of what is a woman? And if you prefer, we can ask a different question that is similar. What is the difference between a man and a woman? Is there a difference between a man and a woman? Like, this is the problem, and this is the question. Are men and women exactly the same? Can they do exactly the same things? The Bible would say no. From the very beginning, from Genesis 1, it says that man and women are a man and a woman. Men and women are created different. They have different roles. They have different responsibilities. They have different giftings. They have different wiring. They are just different. And throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament, we see those differences, and we see how they're supposed to work out in a home. We see how they're supposed to work out in a church. We see how they're supposed to work out in government. We see how they're supposed to work out in all spheres. But now in our culture, we pretend that those spheres don't exist. We pretend that women can do everything a man can do. And the reality is it's just not true. Like, would you rather have a 6'4", 280-pound full muscle guy in a fight? Or would you rather have a 5'4", 90-pound woman in a fight? I mean, obviously there's a difference there. And this is the question. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between men and women? Do we know what the difference is? Can we identify it? Can we call it out? Are we confident in saying, yeah, there is a difference, and maybe we should staff towards that difference? Maybe we should create our society along the lines of that difference, because society works better, families work better, churches work better when we notice that there's a difference, and we really create our societies around that. Or do, like the culture, do we just pretend that, well, there's no difference? And in fact, there's so no difference, like Dr. Richard Rachel Levine, that you should just transition people whenever you want because they're probably in the wrong body anyway. Dr. Levine, I'll show you this quick clip. He says that you need to make sure your kids go through the right puberty, because you don't want them going through the wrong puberty. In other words, what if they're a boy going through a girl puberty? Because that's real, except it's not. Let's listen to this and then we'll talk about it.
Adolescence is hard and puberty is hard. What if you're going through the wrong puberty? What if you inside feel that you are female, but now you're going through a male puberty?
Like, I don't even know how to respond to that, but this is Dr. Richard Rachel Rodrigo Levine, Admiral, Health and Human Services leader. I mean, he's leading the healthcare for America or something. And he's saying, maybe you can go through the wrong puberty. Like, he says he's a doctor, and I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure biologically you just go through whichever puberty you are. You don't get to choose. I'm going to need a lesson in this Common Core biology to understand this one, because I mean, that is a new one for me. But here's the thing, right? This is where this argument has to go. The argument doesn't make sense because it can't make sense. Their argument is that men can literally, actually, materially become women, and vice versa. But this has no basis in reality, so they'll just keep saying it. They'll say it louder and louder, and after they say it, they will force you to agree. You must agree. You have to agree. Otherwise, they will silence you. And this is why I said at the beginning, we may or may not have this episode up online. We'll see what happens, but I have to say true things because biblically it's clear, biologically it's clear. Anybody who has had children knows this is clear. My boys, for all of their life so far, as soon as they could stand, they would pick up a stick, and the stick immediately turned into a gun or a sword. Literally, from the time they could stand, this is what happened. And then they would hit each other and punch each other, and they still hit each other and punch each other. And apparently that's how they show affection. And being a guy, I know that's kind of how it is. My girl, not so much. She has all the feels. She's the most amazing young woman, and she likes to hug. And she is not a man. And my boys are not girls. And this is the reality we just need to have, and we need to know, and we need to say. And it's really hard because this world is telling us that's a lie. And this world is telling us that we're wrong for suppressing this idea that you can just change into whatever you want to be. And the reality is you can't. You can't change who you are. The only thing you can do is be born again. Rather than trying to change you from the outside in, which is what the culture is trying to do, you need to go to God and be changed from the inside out. That's what God wants to do for you. This culture wants to change your outside to match some idealized or some imaginary form of your inside, which is unfortunate, but never going to change. It's never going to be possible. That's just not the way reality works. God wants to go spiritually to you from the inside and change you from the inside out and give you a new life. And in fact, make you born again, born into a new life, a new flesh, a new spirit. And this is the reality of the Word of God that we have, And when you follow him, you can be born again into this new life where you can find hope and you can find peace. You're not going to find it in this world. You're not going to find it in all of these, all of these ideas, all of these things that this world has for you, this culture has for you. It's just not going to satisfy. It never is. But you can find hope. You can find peace. You can find satisfaction through God and through his son, Jesus Christ, through the power of the word and the spirit. So I hope that you do that. I had this verse up. I liked this one. So let's share this today as we go through. This is out of Colossians when Paul is reminding us, the believers and the church, that we've really got to work on this and we really have to stick to what we know to be true. Paul says to the Colossians, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in him, rooted, built up in him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught, overflowing with thankfulness. I hope that is how you live. I hope that how you live, how you follow after him is in the newness of Christ that you have through your new life, through this new birth in Jesus Christ. I hope that you find him. I hope that you live your life in a different way than this culture is pointing out to you and trying to force you into. And I hope that you do that with your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength. And I hope as you do all of these things that you will follow after Jesus and him alone. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard, and of course, I hope that you will keep the faith. If you appreciated this, hit the like, subscribe button, do all the shares and things. And again, we will see you next time. Thanks.